Hello everyone, and in the clauses series today we are going to learn about a type of subordinate clause which is the noun clause. Before we jump on to the noun clause, let me remind you first about the clause. A clause is a group of words. It should have a subject and a verb, and it may or may not have a complete meaning. In case it has a complete meaning, it is termed as a main clause or independent clause, or if it doesn't convey a complete meaning, it is termed as subordinate clause or dependent clause. Now, under this subordinate clause section, today we are going to learn about noun clause. So let's start with the session now. When we talk about subordinate clauses, it is confirmed that this sentence will also have a main clause. Now, whenever you have a sentence in front of you, your first step is to break it in two clauses. Break it in the main clause and the subordinate clause, and then check whether the subordinate clause is which type of clause. Since today we're going to learn about noun clause, let me tell you how to identify this noun clause and how does it work in a sentence. Now, the main clause will always have a complete meaning. So if I take this sentence, I know gives me a complete meaning. So this becomes my main clause. What I should do becomes a subordinate clause. Now, how to identify whether this subordinate clause is what type of clause? Today, we are going to learn about only noun clause. So how to identify whether this subordinate clause is a noun clause or not? Very simple. Ask the question what to the main clause. Ask the question what to the main clause. And if you get an answer, it becomes, for example, I know. Now to the main clause, I'll ask I know what I should do. Now since this gives me an answer of what, this becomes a noun clause. A noun clause can form a subject of a verb of the main clause, or a complement of the verb of the main clause, or object of a verb, a preposition, a to infinitive, or a participle. Now on each one of these, I will give you one example and you will understand better. The first function of a noun clause is that it can be a subject to the verb. Now let's first identify which is main and the subordinate clause. And you have to remember that the subordinate clause will always start with a conjunction. So here, what she believes in becomes the subordinate clause, whereas is surprising becomes the main clause. Now, in the main clause, look at the verb. The verb is. Now, to this verb, if your clause acts like a subject, then the noun clause here acts like a subject to the verb. If the verb in the main clause is any one of these, like the various forms of be or become, seen, look, appear, etc., then the noun clause will work like a complement to that verb. Now let's look here. The fact is, this is the main clause where the verb here is, right? Now is a present form of the verb be. Now if the next part, that is the subordinate clause, acts like a complement is extra information. It is very different than an object. Then this will work like a complement here in the noun clause. So this becomes your noun subordinate clause. The fact is what? That she has failed miserably. Now a noun clause acting like an object of the verb. Again, identify the main clause here and the subordinate clause here. I do not know is the main clause because it gives us the complete meaning. Now in this main clause, identify the verb. Now to this verb know, the next part of the sentence will act like an object. I do not know what. Ask the question what? Where is the red box? So when it is answering me the question what, then it becomes a noun clause. A noun clause can also work as an object to a preposition. Again, identify, I have to depend on becomes our main clause. But if you look here, before the subordinate clause, we have the preposition on. So if the subordinate clause is acting like an object to the preposition, then also it means that it is a noun clause. And then if you do not understand anything, then ask the question what to the main clause. I have to depend on. Depend on what? What you do. Next, a noun clause can act as an object to either infinitive or a participle verb form. Infinitive are the verbs which start with to. Let's see what do we get. I am glad to know is the main clause, and that you have taught becomes the subordinate, or here I would say noun clause. Right? Now look at the verb in the main clause. Know. But this to know is a to infinitive form. So if you have a subordinate clause after this to infinitive form, then it acts like an object to this. So here my noun clause will act like an object to this infinitive form. So let's check this again. I am glad to know. Know what? Again, it answers the question what? That you have taught. So obviously it becomes a noun clause. Now, object to participle. Participle can be of two types, present participle or past participle. Present participle will always have the ing form. So realizing, he hired a taxi. Now in this case, my main clause is broken in two parts and the subordinate clause is inserted in between. So this becomes my main clause, and now the underlying portion, the remaining portion becomes subordinate clause. But this will be a noun clause. How to identify? Realizing he hired a taxi. Realizing what? Realizing what did he realize? That he could not reach on his own. So now that I'm getting an answer to the question what, it becomes a noun subordinate clause. So in other words, it is being an object to the participle used in this sentence. The next case is when the noun clause is used in apposition. Apposition means words which are used to explain more about the noun or pronoun in the main clause. Let's now see what is the main clause here. The news has surprised everyone. This gives me a complete meaning, so it becomes the main clause. Now, the remaining part of the sentence is that you have passed the test obviously becomes a subordinating clause, the word news. But for this news, I am getting some more information that you have passed. What kind of news? That you have passed. It's giving me more information about this word. So in this noun clause, it works as an apposition to the main clause. Now in your exams also you will be told to combine two sentences into one sentence, but when we combine two sentences we always use a conjunction. So if it's a complex sentence, then one part of the sentence is the main clause and the other one is the subordinate clause. So here are three examples where we are going to combine sentences and make them into complex ones, right? So let's start. The crops will be damaged. It is certain. To make this a complex sentence, we have it is certain that the crops will be damaged. Now, it is certain becomes the main clause and that the crops will be damaged becomes the subordinate clause. And here the conjunction used here is that. So what's a complex sentence? Which is a combination of a main clause and a subordinate clause. Come to the next one. Do you know how the rain is caused? So it will be do you know becomes the main clause. How the rain is caused becomes the subordinate clause, and how is the conjunction we use here to make it into complex. Look at the third one. The minister has proposed a bill. it is confusing. The bill that the minister has proposed is confusing. What's the main clause here? The bill is confusing is the main clause, while the rest of the sentence is the subordinate clause, and the conjunction used here is that. So this is how you make it into complex sentences. But when we talk about noun clause, what is the question that it has to answer? What? Now let's see if all these answer the what question to the main clause or not. It is certain. Certain what? That the crops will be damaged. It's a noun clause. Next, do you know? Do you know what? How the rain is caused? Again, it's a noun clause. The bill that the minister has proposed is confusing. The bill. What bill? Which the minister has proposed. So in all these three cases, because it answers the question what, it becomes a noun clause. So that's all in today's session. Today we learned about how to identify the noun clause and how to make complex sentences when noun clause is used. In my next session, we'll do adjective clauses. Till then, take good care of yourself and practice a lot on clauses. I'm sure you'll get it soon. Thank you very much. Keep smiling. All the best.